Good evening. Welcome to Fresh Natural Live. It's another Monday, and it's another time for us to share some wonderful information with you. I hope your day's been going very well. It's been nice and warm here in Houston. I don't like the word hot. We got up to 101 degrees yesterday. I think we're in the high 90s today. I was in and out of the weather, and I enjoy the warmth here in Houston. Beautiful sunny days. I think it's going to be that way throughout the week. And of course, I had a very busy weekend. We're doing some upgrades at our health and wellness center, and we're expanding our nutrition center and some other things. And so we had a little bit of a break-in our gate late Friday night, early Saturday morning. So that sort of threw things off for me for the weekend. But other than that, it was a great weekend. It was productive, and so was today. So I hope you had a great and productive weekend, as well as a great and productive start of the week this Monday. We're going to be talking about gardening, and I think you're going to really like this show. It's highly unusual for a cardiologist to be talking about gardening and raising food to feed your family, but this is a central part to optimal nutrition, and optimal nutrition is a central part to general health, health in general, and cardiovascular health in particular. So it's a very, very important topic for cardiologists and nutritionists to talk about. I am not an expert on farming and gardening. I have some personal experience, but as I read through some topics online and consulted with some experts, I don't think there's one piece of advice that fits all, but I think there's a group of there's a collection of information and considerations to be had. And we're just going to have a simple conversation. Tonight's discussion is going to be a little bit shorter than usual, but I think it's going to be just as impactful and informative. So sit back and enjoy the show. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. So as I said, we will be talking about how to grow a garden to feed your family. And there are a number of considerations to take, and we're going to have those considerations. Join me tonight is Iselsa Adosum, our resident nutritionist. Good evening, Iselsa. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Just fine, just fine. And so, I think a disclaimer, neither of us are experts in gardening or farming, but I think we have a little bit of insight. I mean, how many acres do you have planted?
So my experience is through growing up with a mother who was always gardening and had very large gardens until my adult years, and always try to make me work in the garden.
There you go.
And then knowing people who are farmers. So I'm kind of like on the edge.
That's that's actually a pretty valuable experience. And so sometimes the bird's eye view can give you quite a bit of perspective there. My experience is somewhat similar. I have relatives who've grown gardens and farms and things like that. And I've had several seasons of successful gardening at my house here. A number of years ago, I got a little busy and it was interrupted, and then started back without so much success. But I'm back at it again, or plan to be back at it again pretty soon. And so I thought it'd be a very poignant topic to have with our listeners, because we're dealing with food shortages. And, they talk about food shortages from the standpoint of economic collapses and inflation and increased food costs. Recently there was we had to talk about shortage of baby formula and things like that. And often you hear news stories about empty shelves at supermarkets and the like. But even without these so-called extreme conditions, the quality of the food that we have available to us, and we've done shows on this where we talk about you have supermarkets that they're shipping food from all over. much of the food. Some of it's gassed or frozen and thawed and shelved for long periods of time. And then, of course, the packaged goods that are chemicalized, not to mention how food's grown in these, massive industrial farms and the like, the chemicals they need to use to enhance, fertilizing the fruit and spraying and so on. So you have to take into consideration the heavy adulteration of the food that we have available to us, even in so-called times of plenty. One can make a reasonable argument that we are still in food shortages due to the lack of quality of the food that we have. And so with that consideration, even if, the so-called apocalypse doesn't come in the next 6 to 24 months, I think this is very important information to have because, if you don't grow any of your own food, I think it's a good thing to strongly consider. And you don't have to be an expert. And I think it's point on that neither of us are experts in leading this discussion because I think, if you have non-experts to point out the fact that, hey, this doesn't require, supreme expertise. First and foremost, it requires a willingness and an understanding that it's important. So I think that's I think the take-home message we'd like to get across, in addition to some of the key facts that we'll share with you. But before we go on, I want everybody to take the time out and give us a thumbs up, hit the like button, and also subscribe, share if you have time. Hello, Danielle Harding, and I agree this is very informative, timely information. Cedric Dukes, hello. Norma O'Dane, hello. JW, as usual, hello. Catherine Welch, hello. Our usual favorites, and people are still signing on as we get started here. And Otis Granville, good evening. So I'm going to share with the audience an article I found online. In fact, this is online. And by the way, in the chat below, we have the links to some of this information I'll make reference to below, including this article, so you can go on and read it yourself. I looked at a number of articles. I looked at a number of things online. I talked to some expert colleagues as those who did. We're going to actually share some information that we've received from these sources, as well as some of our own information. But let's just start with this article, How to Plant a Garden and Feed a Family. And more so than the content of the article, I wanted to share some of the things, considerations that are raised by the author, which I think are quite good. Also, I made notes of about 9 points to consider when growing your own garden. I think these 9 points would be important. So once I kind of discuss this article, I'm going to go into those 9 points. So if you want to take notes, feel free to do so. But, if you've grown vegetable before, you like other gardeners, so they talk about experience level. Many of you may have grown before, you may draw on some experience, you may not draw on some experience. But the first major point they start off with is plant what you enjoy. So especially if you're getting started, if you're new to this, try to plant some foods that you're going to enjoy eating. So if you like eating tomatoes or cucumbers, asparagus, start with those foods there because, if you, or I should say, when you get success and then you eat the foods that you like, you'll notice the superiority of the food that's fresh grown from your garden to what you buy in the supermarket. And that reward of eating the plant foods you like will, probably encourage you to continue to grow more. So also, consider what you're growing now. People talk about analyzing your grocery bill. That's probably an ad, but canning and preserving. Now, I've never done any canning or preserving, but and this is one of the points that I'll make in the pointing session. But there are many people who grow things. And this depends on the region, how many growing seasons you have. You may have to grow a lot of certain types of things and can and preserve. Be careful on canning and preserving. In fact, we may actually do a show on canning and preserving the healthy way because, oftentimes, they cook, say, fruits down and put lots of sugars in them. That may not be the healthiest way, but there may be some healthier ways to can and preserve we'll discuss. But I mentioned this, or the article mentioned this in the context of considering what you're going to do with the excess produce. They talk about extending the season. You can have greenhouses. Now, this image here shows a seemingly large greenhouse. Now, if you're new to this, obviously you're not going to invest in a large greenhouse, but you can do something on a smaller scale, especially you live in an area where your winters are long and your growing seasons are fairly short. We're here in the Houston area, and we can grow all year long. However, in the very heat of the year, our greens don't tolerate the heat very well, and some other vegetables don't either. And so greenhouses actually help us here in the opposite way, may help people in the north. So greenhouses can be very helpful. Now, they mentioned here to calculate yield and plan rows. I'm actually going to share with you, and I'll put this on the camera. There's a little grid here, and there's a link to this little spreadsheet that a university calculated created and calculated how many rows you need to plant for a certain yield. Now, it's pretty broad, but it gives you a good starting. So we have that as a resource. Be flexible in terms of what you plant. The flexibility is going to be required in terms of the seeds that are available, what's available to you in your area, and the like. And so this, I thought, was a pretty good article. I didn't go through the details of it. I skimmed it, read through it, then skimmed it several times, and thought it was a pretty general article that would be helpful in terms of just sort of looking at some general points. However, I did get some very specific points in terms of what to consider. So, and I looked at a number of different shows, and one gardener actually had a pretty good outline of what to consider. Because really, when you're talking about gardening, you're talking about growing your own food, you really have to consider what's good for you. And I'm going to take this down. And so here's some basic considerations that you have to make when you're looking at planting your own garden. And I'll throw a few other comments. Number one, you need to think about how much food do you want to grow. Is your goal to completely become fully self-sufficient, or is it to supplement what you're currently getting from the produce market? In our health and healthy lifestyle series class, we teach our clients, we have a certain section on food procurement. And we go through the whole spectrum in terms of, how food is procured in supermarkets and other places. And what we do is we suggest that people start with finding your local growers first and foremost, and creating relationships with your local growers. This gets you close, even though you're not growing, this gets you close to having food that's grown in, near your backyard or close to your backyard. But start a relationship with those growers, because you're buying from them, you're supporting their businesses. As you start to do things on your own, they may actually give you some pointers or some tips. They are experts in your community, and you're not necessarily a competition to them if you grow your own. In fact, in our area, we have an organization called Plant It Forward, and some of the growers will actually help you grow things on your property. So it just depends on relationships that can be made. But I said that to say this: most of you are not going to be expert growers, are not going to have large farms or the like. So most of you will be starting off where you're supplementing what you purchase. And so I like to say, great, start off purchasing as much as you can locally. Okay, you may still have to go to the supermarket, purchase as much as you can locally. Then what you can do is grow what you can. So for instance, if you only have a balcony or front porch, whatever the case is, you may get jars out and grow herbs. Okay, so grow some herbs and seasoning, for your meals, and then purchase your greens or whatever it is from the local growers. So you got fresh food from your own growth, etc. Then over time, and again, you consider the things you like. You may grow, fruit or something. Or the best watermelon I've had. And I've grown watermelon over several seasons here in the Houston area. The best watermelon I've had grew out of pots. The sweetest. They were little small ones. I have had some successfully grow out of the ground, but the best crop I've had grew out of pots. And so you can start with something that you may not think will grow out, and pot. Sweet potatoes, for instance, grow very well in buckets and barrels. So you have a nice sized back porch or patio. You can get a barrel with, organic soil, and you put the sweet potatoes in. Those things reproduce, year after year. And there are other plant vegetables like asparagus are easy to grow and so on. So you can start off by supplementing and growing your own. If you want to gravitate toward becoming fully sustained and maintain your whole family, you want to then consider how much land you're going to need to do that. Now, the recommendation were all over the map with this. Often you read, including the article I shared with you, it's all about 100 to 200 square feet per person in your family. Looked at another YouTube show. Well, you need to do about 3 to 4 times what most people say. So I guess maybe 3 to 400 square feet. I think you start off with what you have. If you have 100 square feet, let's say you have a family of 4 and you have 400 square feet, maybe you have 1,200 square feet, maybe start off with 400 of it or 600 of it. Plant as much as you can. Well, I think it's going to be a matter of trial and error. So that number one consideration, do you want to supplement or become fully sustained? Many people want to start off supplement and grow to fully sustainability. And I think that's a great, goal to have. Even if you don't quite reach it, it's a great goal to have. And that's really where I am. I'm starting off with supplementing and working toward as close as I can get to self-sustainability. Number two, this expert say you have to consider pests and diseases. Now, granted, not being experts in these things, when you grow some things, pests and certain things will, kill it off or do whatever. And this is when you have the relationship with local growers. You can talk to them. There may be some tips and things you can look online. So if you're trying to grow a cucumber and your cucumber plants, eat up, just Google, hey, common pests for cucumbers in the garden. And I bet you'll find something online that's going to give you not only the information about what are the common pests, but how to counter those things in a natural way. So consider, pests and diseases. And these things aren't inherently bad. It's all part of nature. And so these are things that you want to naturally, work around. Also think about your soil health. When I started my garden in the Houston area, I ordered a soil. I had about 40 yards, which is one large dump truck full of soil brought down from a town up north of us. And in this place, they compost their soil for 2 years. So it's on a 2-year compost. And so I started my raised beds with that. And when I started again, I did the same thing. And so you want to consider your soil health, try to get the healthiest soil that you can get. I know some growers with small farms, community gardens and the like have had their soil tested. That's something that you can use as an option. Daniela Harding says baby steps. I agree. And all of these things are baby steps, and it just depends on where you are as to what the baby steps. So that's 3. So number 4 is the weather. Consider the weather. Here in Houston, we have, our summers are hot. And so we consider that in the late winter, spring, and early part of summer, the summer's mild and greens are great. It's great harvest for greens. As we get toward the summer, root vegetables tend to be better. The watermelon, some melons are good. So know the seasons that you have. If it's too cold, many places are very cold, half the year, maybe more than half the year. So your growing seasons are going to be limited. But determine if it's the weather that you have at the time you're planting. That's going to be important. That's number 4. Number 5 will be the seasons. As I alluded to earlier, some places have, year-round growth. And here in the Houston area, we really have, we can grow in all 4 seasons. Now, we can't grow everything in all 4 seasons, but we can grow some things, and there's a certain amount of overlap. So we don't have to plant everything at one time, as opposed to other places. You may have to plant a greater abundance of certain produce at a shorter period of time. So become aware of the planting seasons of your region. That's number 5. Number 6, the variety that you can plant must be researched. So, I tend to rely on the seeds that are available here in the area. So I'll go to local feed stores in various places, And oftentimes the feed stores, they'll give me insights. I have some growing books. And typically the things that can be grown in this area, which is an abundance of produce, we tend to grow here. So, but again, know your region and know what variety of plants you can plant in your region. Number 7, you have to consider your family and your family size. And I think this is a really important one because, if you have a family of 12 and you got a lot of teenagers and they're heavy eaters, then my goodness, it may be that you require more than 100 square feet per person. Depends on the size of people. If you have a family of 5, but you have 3 kids under the age of 7, then they're not going to eat as much. And so that 100 to 200 square feet per person is going to be maybe more accurate on the lower side as opposed to your kids who are teenagers or older and the like. And then to the extent that how much everyone eats plant foods is going to play into that. So you'll have to make adjustments based on your plant side. They also made an 8th point of preservation of food that was alluded to in the article. So, do you preserve your foods? Do you, freeze them? If you grow fruits and berries, like we got berries from local growers, we freeze them, and other types of produce and things you can freeze. And then also consider your planting method. Now, the method I've used and I try to stick with is planting in the soil. For right now, I'm going to start getting some watermelon in the ground. I'm going to start seeding them first, and I'm going to start building my beds. And in fact, what I'm doing now, and this is what I'm in the process of planning. So I contracted a fish pond builder. He's going to build a fish pond. I'm going to have maybe koi and or goldfish, one or the other. I already have one fish pond that's kind of in a seeding area, but this pond is going to be in the corner of my backyard. And I'm going to map out a region of my yard. I have a nice sized yard, a region of my yard where I'm going to plant my beds. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drain water from the bog of the pond. So it's going to have all the nutrients from the fish stuff. Because the bog filter filters the water. So all the fish poop, the algae, all that goes through the bog. And so I'll be feeding and watering my plants from the bog filter. And so that's what I'm setting up to do. So it'll be soil grown plants, watered, hydrated from a bog filter with all the nutrients there. And so I plan to try to feed it naturally. Many people may want to try hydroponics, and many people may want to try a number of different things. I mentioned barrel planting with soil. So consider your planting method. The amount of room you have may affect that, and other resources may affect that. But all of these things that can be beneficial in terms of helping you out. The last thing I want to do is share with you, and this a link to this is in the notes below. And this is a very busy slide, but essentially what this is, and I'm not going to go through the details, but you see here a list of vegetables on the far left column here. And then it says amount needed for one adult in these first 2 columns, number of pounds and the feet of row. And then amount needed for a family of 4, okay, fresh use, okay. And so that's the pounds and the feet of rows, amount of plantage. Amount needed for one adult processed storage, it goes to that. Same with family of 4 processed storage. And then they go through spicing, yield per 100-foot row, et cetera. So I think it's a good starting point in terms of giving you some information. And as I said, the link to this is in the notes below in this section. And I think something like this would be helpful. It's not like you have to be that precise or scientific, but it gives you an idea, a reference, if you will, of a start. And I think that's always helpful. So I'm going to pause right there, and we'll take a quick little break, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to get Associate's take on some of this, and we'll look at questions and wrap up with questions and final remarks. Y'all stay tuned. Okay, so you just recently interviewed a real expert on your podcast not long ago. So how do I do compared to the expert?
No, you did really well. You did really well. I just want to say
You did
first that
good.
I think this is a really important topic for a very particular reason. Like when I started going between the US and Africa,
Mhm.
where I remember I came back and there was a storm in the DMV and all of the stores had closed. Like I went to Whole Foods, it was closed. They were closed for like 2-3 days because they had a power outage. And then, they throw out food if they feel like it might have gone bad or whatever. And that was the moment where I was like, wait a minute, what would happen in America if all the grocery stores were closed? Because in Africa, you're so close to the earth, things are growing all over. Everyone knows what the plants look like. There's markets everywhere. And for me, it was such a stark contrast where I was like,
Mm.
I feel like we're technologically advanced, but we're set up for problems. Like if the store is closed, like most people think their vegetables and their fruits come from the grocery store. And I remember when I lived in New York and people were like, yeah, like, they were talking about the grocery store, like the grocery store is where plants originate. And I was like, plants grow. Like, and my mother, because my mother's a gardener, it's always fascinating to walk around with her because she can spot edible plants anywhere. And sometimes she'll just grab stuff and start, washing it and eating it. And you're like, what are you doing?
Oh
But
wow, that's
I
a
think
great
it's a
skill.
really important skill to try to cultivate is to be able to identify plants that are edible in the event there was, the ish hit the fan and we were all out here looking for stuff. But the problem is there's not that much growing right now in the United States. Like it's only in very specific areas. So having some sort of supplement on your own, whether it be just knowing local farmers, going to the farmers market, growing, some really key staples for your own diet, I think is really important.
No, I agree with you 100%. And along the lines of you mentioned events like hurricanes and like, and we're in hurricane season now. June to November starts a hurricane season. In the southeast, but we there have been situations where, like you said, stores are shut down and people are very desperate and they're looting and behaving crazily. And if one thing you do is stockpile seeds, learn how to sprout, do things like that. That's things you can do, in a matter of days with just fresh water. And so there's some things you can learn to do. I think the key is to get started, to have the mindset of saying, okay, wait a minute, this is new to me. However, I'm going to get started, and so I'm going to start with sprouting or growing microgreens or herbs or whatever the case is. And as you get some experience, the hands-on experience give you an extra dimension to it. So it's one thing to talk about something or hear about or read about something in theory, but then it's much more to actually go through the process and experience it. And so there's an added dimension or dimensions, if you will, that you gain out of growing things yourself. And so I think the key is to get started. And I can't reemphasize the point you made. I mean, I like the fact you contrast coming from countries in Africa where things are grown everywhere, and here in the United States where it's like, okay, we rely heavily on the supermarket, and when there's a hurricane and the supermarket is closed, then many people are just they're lost. And so you can arguably say that most of the United States is, or at least these parts of the United States, are food deserts. We like, oh, you have food deserts, and you don't have a Whole Foods. It's not a food desert. Well, Whole Foods might shut down.
It's so true. The day that happened, I was like, oh my God, like, what would I do?
Yeah. And so just an FYI, we at our nutrition center and also in my home, we're starting to stockpile seeds and dry goods and beans and things like that. We bought, I think, 300 or 400 pounds of wild rice. So this is partly for our nutrition center. We get our wild rice from a farm up in Minnesota, and they harvest it from the lake. And so it's, naturally it's wild, and it's more than organic. It's wild, and it's grown in its natural state. And so we use that, we sprout it and the like. So we've ordered 400 pounds, and we'll be sending more. We'll be sending more over time. But I think that's really an important key to remember, is that your supermarket may not always be there for you. And even when it is there, it may not be giving you the best food that you can get. While I'm thinking about it, again, give us a thumbs up. If you're just joining in, thumbs up or show us some love. You can also subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, to get more information about other topics, other important topics that we'll be having over time. And you can go to our channel and look at previous topics that we've discussed as it relates to health, natural health, and the like. So anyway, so it's also, what do you like, or when you're in the States, I'll put it that way, do you like to support your local growers? Do you have some farmers markets near you? What, you're in Fairfax, or in Fairfax, Virginia, or somewhere in thereabouts?
Yeah, somewhere thereabouts. So be telling people where my hood is.
I'm sorry. Somewhere on the northeast. I say I'm in Houston, but Houston's big, so I guess maybe the state of Virginia is
People
not.
come find me. No. There's a farmer's market. There's a farmer's market I go to on the weekends usually.
Uh-huh.
And I live where I live because of I really liked having the farmer's market right there. There's also like an organic store right in my neighborhood as well. But one thing I really appreciate about getting to know the farmers and getting stuff every weekend when I'm here is there's a big difference in the flavor of the food, as well as how long it lasts. Like if you go get some greens from like Whole Foods or whatever, you might notice it starts wilting and looking a little crazy, like, in about a week or maybe less. I've had greens from the farmer's market last over a week, like way longer.
Yep.
And they taste better.
Yep.
Another great thing about growing your own food, or at least knowing where your food is grown, is just controlling the amount of pesticides that you're consuming, because the chemicals and all the things that are they're adding to prevent pests and all that stuff. At least you have someone that you can look in the eye and ask them what's going on here. Whereas with the grocery store, you got all these food miles. You don't know where that's exactly come from. Sometimes they've added things to make it look fresh, just to while it's sitting in the supermarket. So I love supporting local farmers, and I can taste the difference. And for me, that matters, because I like my food to taste good.
No, I agree with you. I think that's a great point. And the shelf life, is so long, not because they add chemicals to it, it's because when you get it from the grower at the farmer's market, it's usually harvested within a day or two of it being at the farmer's market. And so you're getting it very fresh. It's very fresh at the time of acquisition, and very few hands have touched your food, and so it's very, very valuable. One thing I do want to mention, I probably should have put it into the consideration of my earlier discussion, but one thing you have to realize when you're consuming food that's local, organic, and sustainable, and in your backyard, that's either a combination of the above, you have to realize that your plants are growing in an ecosystem, and you're going to have little bug bite holes in it. And these aren't like diseases and bug bites. And some people use substances like diatomaceous earth to kind of keep the bugs away and things. And you can do that. But the point is that you will have bugs. So whenever I buy organic, locally grown corn, and I don't eat a lot, but I bought some recent from a local grower, I always pull the shuck back and I look for a worm in the corn. And if there's a worm in the corn, I flick it off, because I eat vegan. So I flick the worm off, but I know that corn is good. It's passed the test. And so when we recently switched to local sustainable food, and we rinse our greens off, pretty well. We don't, put it in the dishwasher, or, the laundry and soap and water or anything like that. But the point is that, on rare occasion, there'll be a bug on one of the greens, and we had somebody get a salad that had bugs on. We don't like to have, but it happens. It's just part of natural food that's not sterile. And so I
Well,
just want to make you aware of the fact that you're going to see these things.
no, and Dr. Montgomery in Africa, like there's a whole process. So I love living in the contrast because you come here and like there's pre-washed greens and like if you see a bug, someone might be like, you know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
one bug and someone's freaking out, In Africa, literally it feels like if you go to the market and you go get greens or you get stuff, depending on what grower you go to, because there's some markets that sometimes they've done a little bit more work, like they've done some pre-cleaning. Sometimes it's like they pull that joint out the ground and they're like, this is for sale. And so for me, it was like, whoa, this is like a whole extra layer of work. Cause now we gotta like really scrub multiple times. We're soaking it in vinegar. We're doing all this stuff. And so it becomes a little workout before you get to preparing the meal.
So I'm glad you said that, because here's my take on it. Because when I'm growing my stuff out, I remember we had like some dinner. I had guests over and the like, and then we went to the garden. And this when the guests were in the house, and I went harvest. I got a couple of guests, friends. We bought some large bowls, went out to the garden and harvested greens, put them in the bowls, brought them in, and then we made the salad. Now, when I do that, and I used to do that for my before going to work at Harvard, when I had great, bountiful growth and all of that, I would just do a light rinse. I didn't do anything heavy. Sometimes I'll leave a little dirt on my green. I'm not saying everyone else should do that, but there's a little bit of dirt on there, whatever. And I add my seasoning and whatnot. I make sure there are no bugs. I'm not eating the bugs, but if I see a bug, I'll flick it off or whatever and rinse it extra. But I don't go through a lot of extra effort because I think, the soil I use was organic, and the microbes that are in those soils, I think is going to help my microbiome and maybe help my B12 or maybe help my ecosystem enhance itself. What do you say?
In Texas, sure. In Africa, you could get a mean parasite bacterial infection that would not be fun. So,
okay. Yeah, I've heard people say that. You and your fiance said that also.
Yeah, because the thing is that there's like, there's a sanitation issue, you know what I mean? So there's sanitation issues, there's issues with water cleanliness, these kinds of things. So it's really important in Africa to thoroughly especially if you're going to be eating anything raw. Like this is why I actually eat more cooked there, because I'm not interested in like compromising my microbiome. So I'm like, okay, what can I eat raw? What can I, what do we feel like, washing real crazy today or not? You know what I mean? If I cook it, I know everything died.
Okay, well, when I visit your center there, I'm going to eat raw, so we're going to have to scrub and clean. You're going to have to show me the
no
raw.
problem. No problem. No problem.
That'll be a lot of fun. That'll be a lot of fun. But so again, as we wrap this up, on one hand, there are a lot of nuances and complexities and different aspects to growing your food and sustaining yourself. On the other hand, it's not rocket science. And so there's some rocket science aspects of it, but it's not all rocket science. And I think the most important factor is your attitude and willing. Well, I think the first most important factor is that you're understanding that this is something important for you to learn about and learn how to do. I think that's the most important thing, because how you nourish your body is going to be the most important thing for your health, and how you procure your plant foods is a very important component of how you nourish your body. So with that component, then the next step is to say, okay, I'm going to get started somehow, some way. Your schedule may not allow you to clear, acres or large plots of land, but get some soil, put it in a couple of mason jars and put some seeds in it, water it, and see what happens. And then you go from there. But I think just the attitude of knowing that this is important, you may be at a point where you don't have the time and insight and know-how to start today, but knowing that it's important is something that over time you can start to invest more time into the whole process. because I think it's something that's going to really benefit you in the long run. And what I tell a lot of my patients, they say, well, doc, I don't have time to chop my vegetables and all this other stuff, for salads and whatnot. And I say, well, look, you either chop or be chopped, because if you eat bad food long enough, you're going to be in the operating room being chopped on by a surgeon. And so you need to take in consideration, and yeah, everybody's busy, and these are tough times, and I understand it. I have a busy life, and it seems like there's not a spare moment. But when a heart attack comes and a stroke comes and heart failure comes, a COPD exacerbation comes, they just knock on your door and they say, I'm here, and everything else gets canceled. They don't make an appointment. They don't say, well, how's the family? Can you come over tomorrow? No, they say, I'm here. And whatever you're doing, you put it down. You say, yes, sir, Mr. Heart Attack. Yes, sir, Mr. Stroke, etc. And so keep in mind that these diseases don't wait, so you shouldn't either. So take this process of nourishing your body, appropriately, very seriously, because I think it's going to be one of the more important things that you invest your time. Yes.
Yeah, another thing is that like gardening, like we forget that food is not supposed to just be an instant thing. That's what's so sacred about gardening. It's like seed time and harvest. Like you're supposed to put in work
I love
and
that.
then appreciate it when it comes up, right? But we're so used to this fast food nation like mentality where it's like everything just shows up. We can DoorDash everything. I love DoorDash when I'm here, but in Africa there's no DoorDash. Like if I don't find food, I'm not gonna have any, So I think it's really important, and I think it's an essential part of nourishing ourselves, the actual work to find the appropriate nutrients and the appropriate ingredients for the things we're making.
No, I think you're right, and I mean you can't overemphasize the amount of convenience we've gotten used to. We've become very spoiled here in this society, but there may come a time, and there have come times when these conveniences aren't available, and there may become other times when they're not available. And even with these conveniences, you're not getting the best thing. So it's kind of a game of charades, if you will. Somebody asked about preparing the soil in advance. I get pre-composted soil, but if you're saving your vegetable leftovers and things, that's one thing you do to compost your own soil. The composting barrels you can purchase, or you can just save compost in bags and have it sort of a compost pile in your garden area. So that's one way you can plant it. Also, as you grow season after season, one thing I realized, I had several successful planting seasons. As I tilled one crop, it sort of the roots and things went in, and that sort of helped with composting and maturing the soil as well. And you have to alternate different things, and you have to look up what a good complementary produce to plant over time. And somebody mentioned Bob Randall in the Houston area has a book, and is associated with Urban Harvest on terms of what are the planting season. You may also buy an almanac. That's one thing I learned from a cousin of mine here in the state, is that an almanac really helped me, because what happened was, especially when I was planning from season to season, when I was starting something, it would tell me, okay, you got a full moon here, plant it this time in reference to the full moon, etc. And so I found that to be very, very helpful. So an almanac, at least here in the States, can be helpful. They're very inexpensive to buy. So anyway, thanks to Sosa. It's been wonderful. Two non-experts talking about growing, but I think we pulled it off okay. I think from listening to our chat, people got a lot out of it. And I think it's really, I think this is a talk that probably suits the majority of people, because most people are not experts. And so, an expert will probably have to talk down to this level anyway. And I think getting started allows you to create your own expertise for your own circumstances and situation. I think that's going to be the most important thing. And that's probably where the experts do anyway. I mean, you probably have different farmers in different regions of countries in the world. and everybody has their technique and a different approach to things. And so, there's probably not a universal expertise. There may be some universal rules in general, but everybody has their own insight. And I think we just want to encourage each and every one of you to gain your insight. So anyway, I will see you backstage. And as I close out, guys, as usual, I've learned a lot, even in just having this discussion. It's also raised a number of excellent points, and many of you raised some excellent points in the chat. And I really want you to take this to heart. It seems like a very light topic, one where it's, okay, I'll get around to doing this. But I think we have been and will continue to be in situations where our food quality is deteriorating. So even though the supermarkets, will have some amount of abundance in terms of, produce or whatever on the shelves, the quality is deteriorated greatly over the years. And there are likely to come times where there will probably be shortages. So you need to be prepared for it. So you want to stockpile seeds, get used to using those seeds, whether sprouting or growing in canisters or the like. Just start with where you are and move forward. I think that's the best thing you can do, because you want to take this very seriously, because your health depends on it. So I'm glad you joined us. Hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe. Please share this information with anyone you think will benefit from it. And we'll see you next week. And until next time, keep it fresh, natural, and live.